there. This video is going to continue where I left off in our last video. We're going to continue working on our web page. Here's an example of what it looks like so far. So far we've just used some basic HTML elements. So if you haven't watched the prior videos on how to get to this part and how to use our code editor, I would suggest that you stop and you go back and watch those videos. For those of you continuing on with me, thanks for being here. We're going to continue our discussion on HTML tags with our image tag. We're going to start there first. So with images, there are two different ways that you can put an image on your web page. And the first one is to go out and find an image that is currently published on the web. One of my favorite places to look is to use images.google.com. You can search for pretty much anything here. So let's say you want to search for mountains. You can go to mountains and see all these great pictures, but legally, which one can you use to publish on the web? Because that's what we're ultimately going to be doing with our work. So the way you can find out if you can use an image without legally violating copyright is to go up to the search tools in images.google.com and select from usage rights. So I like to select the labeled for non-commercial reuse, and then you can see some of these images are the same. We still get quite a bit of images, and then you can choose from any of these that you would like to do. So non-commercial reuse would be education, nonprofits, things like that. Anything that isn't going to make you money. So it's not like you're trying to sell this or sell something on a commercial website. The other one labeled for reuse, if you select that one, that can be used for commercial sites as well. So you're free to use these legally. Then they have a couple options for labeled for reuse with modification. And what that means is if you want to crop it or add some text or somehow make it your own, then you're welcome to use it. So non-commercial reuse is generally where I like to go when I search, and then again choose from any of these, and they just keep going and going and going. So for this example, I wanted to put an HTML5 logo into my programming languages I know. So I'll show you how I do this. Okay, so I like to kind of scroll over it and see where things are coming from and what the size of these images are. You can kind of see this is 1024 by 1024. This is coming from wikimedia.org, and generally I have problems with the Wikimedia files. They kind of make it so they're hard to borrow. So I'm going to try and skip through and find some other one. So let's see, there's flickr.com, wikipedia.org. It's a little bit easier. Let's take a look at this Flickr one. Okay, so here's this HTML5 logo. Is it perfect? No, I mean, you could spend hours trying to find the perfect image, right? I know I do. Okay, so once you click on it, there is a link to view the image. Okay, so if you click view image, this URL is going to be the URL that you're going to use for your website. Now here's where the problem comes in. Ideally, if these are your own images or things that you've published on a site, then it's easy. You know that the images are there. But when you're selecting an image that's posted on an existing site, you're at the liberty of the site that is publishing that. So if for some reason Flickr disappears or this user deletes this image or something like that, then you're going to have a big old empty space with an X for a missing image. So it's best to publish your own images or upload your own images to the web server. But sometimes for the purpose of these activities, it's easier just to kind of go out and find something. So once you have this full URL and you see it in this window, we can generally expect that it will work well in our page. So let's find out, because I'm not 100% sure that image will work. I always need to check them out. Okay, so I'm going to put this image underneath my heading tag for programming languages I know. Okay, here's that heading tag, and I want the image to come up right underneath here. Okay, so I'm gonna create a new line, and I'm gonna use IMG as my tag, and I need to pass an attribute for this particular tag or it's not going to work. And the attribute is SRC, which stands for source. I'm going to type equals, and then I'm going to put my double quotation marks, and I'm going to close that tag. Now the image tag is different from all the other tags because it doesn't have a closing tag. It's kind of weird that there's different rules out there, but with the image tag, that's all we need. We just need to pass it some information in the source. And this is where I'm going to right click and okay, I'm going to Control V and put that there. And of course I ended up deleting my equals sign. So maybe, so there it is. Okay, so you should, if you formatted it correctly, you should have the IMG in blue, SRC in green, equals, and then orange is that image. And look, you can see it's coming up. Isn't that nice? Okay, so let's try it. Let's save it. File save. Refresh my page, and there it is. Okay, so here is my image tag. Now the other thing to keep in mind, that your image is going to be the size of the image that is published unless you make modifications to it. And it's best to make those modifications in your CSS or have that image already modified. So if you have like a Photoshop or some other photo editor program, resize that image down to a smaller image size so that it works with your page. Okay, we'll talk more about images as we go on. It's kind of a little outside the scope of the topic of what we're talking about today, but just keep in mind that if you have a gigantic image, like let's say you have a photo that you've taken and it's 4,000 pixels by 4,000 pixels, you go and you put it on here, it's going to be gigantic, and you want to modify it. There's an easy way to modify it, which is to specify another attribute called width, and you can specify that width either in percentage or in pixel size. So if I wanted to say like 50% width, let's see what happens. This should shrink my image by 50%. And it doesn't look like it really did that. Let's see if it's 300. Let me see if I can change it to 150. Let's see if that works. Okay, so 150 worked, but for some reason the 50% didn't work. Try that again. Yeah, so sometimes weird things happen with your images. If you want to specify a pixel width, then you can put that in there, and I'll go ahead and keep the 150 inside there. Okay, so that is one way to do an image. Another way to do an image is to actually download the image file or have it already existing on your computer and upload it. So if I want to, let me grab a different HTML. Let's say I want to grab the CSS logo. So yes, and there are some nice ones that have them combined, but let's see if I can find this one. Okay, so let's say I want this particular image. The best thing to do is to click View Image and then right-click Save Image As, and then you need to find the page that you have put your HTML document in. I think it's in my web design class under Practice. Okay, so I'm going to put it here. Now, I can save it. It's a PNG file. Now, there are 3 image types that you want to use on the web. The first one is a JPEG. The second one is a GIF. The third one is a PNG. Those are the 3 types of image files that we generally work with. Okay, so I'm going to click Save. And now, instead of having a full URL image, I'm just going to reference the name of my file because it should be in the same directory. So as you see, as I start typing, it pulls up the directory and the file names that I have in here. So I'm going to select that one, and let's see what happens when I save it. So there you go. Here is my next image. Now you can see the difference between these. They're not really lined up, and that can be modified in my CSS, or I can work with those images to make them more the same size, etc., until I want it. And this is where you can really lose your time in your HTML and CSS because you want to get things in the right position, right? But anyway, just to show you, those are the two different types. Now, the important thing to note is that because you're using this image and it's on your local machine, that when you go to upload this page to a web server, you're going to need to include that file as well. But the good thing about this is that you know the file is there and you're never going to see an X, okay? Because it's going to be published out there on the web. Now, the other thing that you should know about images is that there's another attribute called alt, and alt is for screen readers. So for people with visual impairments, you can specify an alt tag that describes the image. Okay, so I can just put in here that this is the CSS logo, and you can kind of tell by the name of the image file what it is, but this particular one, you have no idea what that is. So if you had a visual problem and you couldn't see that image, it would be nice to be able to have that alt tag. And when we click save, now if I was looking at this in a screen reader, I would be able to see that this said HTML5 logo and CSS3 logo. Okay, a couple more tags that I want to talk to you about before we close out this video. And the first one is an HR tag. Okay, now an HR tag, it's not something we use too often anymore. We used to use it a lot, but I want to point it out to you just in case you have the desire to use it. An HR tag is a horizontal rule. It's basically just a horizontal line. So let's say I want to separate my sections with a horizontal line, like maybe between the About Me and Programming Languages. I can come down here after my paragraph and just type in the tag HR. Okay, so horizontal rule, and that's what it does. It puts that line in between here. Maybe I want to add another one for my favorite websites. Again, I think this is, oops, not an H2, HR. This isn't something that people really use anymore, but just to give you an idea what that tag looks like, there we go. The other thing that I want to show you is, like, let's say we wanted to write a poem, okay? So let's just add something down here. My original poem. Okay, so in the event that you want to write something, you've got your paragraph, and you want to start your poem. This is my poem. I am not very poetic, but this is what you get. Okay, so very creative, I know. So here's my poem, and what I want it to do is I want each line of my poem to be on a separate line. But what's going to happen is that it's all going to appear on the same line. And why is that? So the reason it's all going to appear on the same line is because I'm just using a paragraph tag. Okay, so what if you might say, well, put everything as a paragraph. Okay, let's just look at that and see if that looks good. So nice that the code is being formatted here nicely for me. Okay, so I've got 3 paragraphs here. Now let's see what that looks like. So this is good, but let's say I don't want it to be spaced like that. Let's say I want it just to go from one line to the next without this extra space in here. What would I use? And the answer is you would use a BR or a line break. Okay, so a couple things to note, that just because I hit a break or enter in my code doesn't mean that that's going to be shown on my actual page. Okay, so this is considered the HTML white space rule. I could technically have, you know, all the space in here like this between my words, and when I click save, all it's going to do is still give me that one line. And that's because what happens in HTML, the browser basically takes and gets rid of all this white space and collapses it so that it won't display. So we're going to use this BR tag at the end of our line. Okay, and that's going to say, I want you to just start a new line, and I don't want you to necessarily make a new paragraph, right? So I'm going to put these all like this. Kind of see, I'm a little OCD about my code, getting it all lined up nicely, because this is kind of driving me crazy. Okay, so let me save this, and now you'll see here, this is my poem. Not very poetic, but this is what you get. That's what I want with line after line after line, and we do that using the BR line. So if you want something like this with the space between it, like you would in paragraphs, then you're going to use the P tag. But if you want something like this, you're going to start with the paragraph tag and then put your breaks in between those. Okay? So from here on out, we will continue with basic CSS styling. So now you know how to do images, and you know how to do line breaks and HRs for horizontal rules. Okay, thanks. Bye.